The world today faces an unprecedented global crisis: refugees. How serious is this global crisis? There are more than 22.5 million refugees in the world as of 2017, according to a study by the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees. That means around 30,000 people a day are forced to flee their homes because of conflict and persecution. What causes such a high amount of refugees? Environmental disasters, the politics of war, the risks of genocide, economic insecurity, the list goes on and on. One example of a refugee crisis caused by an environmental disaster was the tsunami in Indonesia. Wall Street Journal reporter Michael Phillips was there.
The camps were very different. The camp that I visited in Banda Aceh was for refugees or internally displaced people who were fleeing the results of the tsunami. And so they lost absolutely everything and just ran for their lives, basically. And that camp was very much a throw together kind of thing. They were tents with dirt floors. They were lucky to have any sort of waterproofing on the ground. People really had to throw things together. It wasn't a very organized kind of a camp.
An example of a refugee crisis caused by the politics of war is in Iraqi Kurdistan.
In Kurdistan, the refugees were people who had fled Mosul, where the fighting against ISIS was going on. So they had gone maybe about an hour from where they'd originally lived. They were able to carry a few more things with them when they left. And the camps, which had been set up by international organizations as well as the Iraqi government, had a much more organized feel to them. They were Quonset hut kind of tents, laid out in streets, not always perfectly drained streets, but they were laid out in streets, and so there were hundreds of these tents and several of these camps. So it was a much more organized refugee situation.
One of the critical challenges of this global crisis is housing. People need shelter and security.
If you get a lot of people living in a very compact area, the most important thing, of course, the shelter itself. So if you're living someplace and it's cold, for example, Kurdistan in December starts to get pretty cold, so you want some way to keep warm. So you need a tent with some sort of insulation that protects you from the elements. If you're living in a more tropical place, and unless it's raining all the time, you might be able to get away with sort of a lighter shelter.
The unique circumstances of different refugee situations strain the basic demands of housing. The issues are immense. One of the many key issues is the affordability of housing for organizations and governments. Another is the transportability of materials and how easy it is for them to get into the camps, and the efficiency of construction, and the designs that provide for quick assembly and sturdy housing for many people. From Indonesia to Iraq, and most importantly to Myanmar, the Rohingya people are suffering one of the most dramatic refugee crises in modern history. German journalist Florian Honig of Geo magazine recently returned from Myanmar covering this.
I've just come back from Rangoon in Myanmar to cover the Rohingya crisis, which is the biggest humanitarian disaster in Asia in the last 50 years. They are all Muslim. It's a Muslim minority in Myanmar, which has been oppressed by the Buddhist majority for a long time. And in the last 2-3 years, there has been kind of a pogrom happening in the northeast of Myanmar. If you ask, for the reasons, even some Muslims only make up 5% of the population, and they've not been a threat to the Buddhist majority at all. But if you can portray this kind of enemy, it's always easy to mobilize support behind you. And the junta in Myanmar, the generals, they feel that right now, nobody is stopping them. They can commit all atrocities they want because China is patting them on the shoulder. You had about 600,000 people crossing from Myanmar into Bangladesh looking for security, for shelter.
The conditions in refugee camps are often horrific, with poor climate and makeshift housing. These are places that seem beyond the control of architecture. Design has struggled to find solutions, with so many limitations. Some of the existing options are tarps, tents, wood and plastic. all with their own particular strengths and weaknesses. One of the transformational findings is that there is not one single solution. That means architectural design is a chance to add new solutions. This global crisis is real. This is my adaptable new solution. Refugee housing. It's the architecture of a global crisis.